A wealthy mansion seller scoffs at a black woman's offer, convinced she's out of her league. But just hours later, he hears her name on the celebrity news, and his entire world is turned upside down. Who is she really? And what happens when the truth finally comes out? Let us know in the comments section below. "Look, lady, I don't think you can afford this place," Henry Weston said, his voice dripping with condescension. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers lazily tapping against the polished mahogany desk in his private real estate office. His suit, crisp and perfectly tailored, reflected the arrogance of a man who had spent years believing he could size people up with a single glance. And right now, staring at the poised black woman in front of him, he was sure he had her all figured out. Vanessa Carter sat across from him, her expression unwavering. She was dressed in a sleek navy pale pantsuit, her natural curls framing her face like a crown. She had seen this type of man before. Smug, dismissive, convinced that wealth and power belonged exclusively to people who looked like him. But she had long since mastered the art of patience. "I wasn't aware affordability was in question," Vanessa said smoothly, her voice carrying an elegance that seemed to annoy Henry more than he would admit. "I'm prepared to make an all-cash offer. Full asking price." Henry scoffed, shaking his head as he let out a low chuckle. "An all-cash offer, huh? Listen, Miss Carter, was it? We get a lot of people interested in this property, and let's be real, it's not exactly in your demographic." He smirked, choosing his words carefully, but making sure the message was clear. Vanessa didn't flinch. If anything, her smile grew wider, but there was no warmth in it. "You're implying I don't belong here," she said, tilting her head slightly. "I'm saying..." Henry leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he were sharing a secret. "This is one of the most exclusive properties in the state. You'd be better off looking at something in a different range." Vanessa let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "You know," she said, reaching into her Hermes handbag and pulling out a sleek black folder, "I've encountered a lot of people like you, Mr. Weston. People who assume that because of how I look, I must be out of place. But I like to prove people wrong." Henry barely glanced at the folder she placed on the desk before pushing it aside dismissively. "Look, Miss Carter, I have a busy schedule. I appreciate your interest, but this property is not..." The office door swung open before he could finish his sentence. A younger man in a gray suit, likely one of Henry's junior associates, stepped inside holding a tablet. His eyes darted between Henry and Vanessa before hesitating. "Sir," the associate cleared his throat, "I just got word from corporate about the interested buyer." He gave Vanessa an apologetic glance before looking back at Henry. "I think you should take another look at her credentials." Henry frowned, clearly irritated. "I already told Miss Carter that this listing isn't a fit for her." The associate's grip on the tablet tightened. "With all due respect, sir, I think you should..." "You know..." Henry stood up abruptly, dismissing the young man with a sharp wave of his hand. He turned back to Vanessa, who was watching him with an amused glint in her eye. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter, but I just don't see this deal working out." Vanessa exhaled through her nose, giving him one last chance. "Are you rejecting my offer because you truly think I can't afford it?" she asked, her voice steady. "Or because you don't want someone like me living in this neighborhood?" Henry smirked, unbothered by the weight of her words. "I'm saying," he said smoothly, "that I have to be selective about who I do business with." Vanessa nodded slowly, standing up. "Well," she said, adjusting the strap of her handbag over her shoulder, "thank you for your time, Mr. Weston." She turned on her heel and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As she passed the young associate, she gave him a knowing look. He gave her a small, almost nervous nod in return. Once the door shut behind her, Henry let out an exaggerated sigh and ran a hand through his salt-and-pepper hair. "Can you believe the audacity?" he muttered, looking back at his associate. "Some people just don't know their place." The young man shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting down to the tablet in his hands. "Sir, about that." He hesitated, but Henry barely noticed, already moving on to the next appointment in his mental schedule. But later that evening, as Henry sipped his expensive scotch and flicked through the channels on his massive flat-screen television, something made him stop. There was a television station attached to the side of the stage, broadcasting CNN, the hauler. A familiar name flashed across the screen. Vanessa Carter makes headlines again with latest multi-million-dollar investment. Henry's glass froze mid-air, his brows furrowed as he turned up the volume. A well-dressed news anchor smiled into the camera. Vanessa Carter, billionaire entrepreneur and media mogul, has once again made waves in the luxury real estate market, adding another record-breaking property to her ever-growing portfolio. Known for her strategic investments and high-profit business ventures, Carter's influence in the industry continues to grow. Harry's heartbeat quickened. The camera switched to a clip of Vanessa at a recent gala event, effortlessly mingling with celebrities and top executives. The caption beneath her image read, "Vanessa Carter, CEO, Carter Media Empire." The same woman he had just dismissed hours ago. The realization hit him like a truck. He had just brushed off one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country as if she were some random nobody. Henry set his glass down with a trembling hand, his mind racing. Was it too late to fix this? Henry Weston sat in his lavish living room, the glow of the enormous flat-screen television illuminating his face. His hand, gripping a crystal glass of scotch, trembled slightly as he stared at the screen. The ice cubes inside barely shifted. His entire body was locked in place, frozen in disbelief. There she was, Vanessa Carter. Not just sitting in some office, trying to buy a home she couldn't afford. Not just another hopeful buyer he could brush aside. No, she was standing center stage at an exclusive celebrity gala, wearing a breathtaking white gown that shimmered under the lights. Her natural curls were pinned back elegantly, her almond-shaped eyes glowing with the kind of confidence that made powerful men take notice. The very same woman he had dismissed without a second thought earlier that day. The bold news ticker running across the bottom of the screen read, "Breaking news, Vanessa Carter expands real estate empire. Billionaire media mogul's latest acquisition stuns industry." Henry felt his stomach drop. "Billionaire?" he muttered, the word barely escaping his lips. The anchor, a polished man in a navy suit, spoke excitedly. "Vanessa Carter has made yet another bold move in the luxury real estate market, securing a historic mansion in a record-breaking deal. Known for her innovative empire, Carter Media, and her extensive influence in both business and philanthropy, Vanessa is proving once again why she's one of the most formidable figures in the industry." Henry's jaw clenched. Record-breaking deal? He had just denied this woman earlier today, humiliated her with his arrogance, acting as though she didn't belong in his world. And now, the entire country knew her name. The news segment cut to footage of Vanessa shaking hands with a real estate broker. Not him, but one of his competitors, Marcus Delaney, a man Henry absolutely despised. The two smiled for the cameras, a stunning oceanfront mansion behind them. "You kidding me?" Henry whispered, his grip tightening around the scotch glass. The camera panned back to the news anchor, who was beaming. Carter's rise to success has been nothing short of remarkable. From humble beginnings to building a billion-dollar media empire, she's made a name for herself as one of the most respected businesswomen in the world, and it seems she's not stopping anytime soon. Henry's stomach twisted. Humble beginnings. He had assumed she was nobody. He had assumed wrong. The scotch burned his throat as he took a long sip, his mind spiraling. He had let personal bias cloud his judgment. And now, he had lost one of the biggest deals of his career. The moment the segment ended, Henry snatched his phone off the glass coffee table, his fingers shaking slightly as he pulled up his assistant's contact. The call rang once before a rushed, nervous voice answered. Mr. Weston?" His assistant, Jeremy, stammered. "I was just about to call you." "You knew?" Henry growled, gripping the phone tighter. "You knew about Vanessa Carter and didn't say a damn thing?" Jeremy hesitated. "Sir, I tried to tell you in the office, but you brushed me off." Henry exhaled sharply through his nose. He closed his eyes, trying to suppress the anger boiling inside him. This wasn't Jeremy's fault. It was his own. "Get me her number," he ordered. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, I don't think that's a good idea." Henry's head snapped toward the phone. "Excuse me?" Jeremy cleared his throat. "Vanessa Carter doesn't take business calls directly. And, well, after what happened today, I doubt she'd want to hear from you." Henry set his glass down a little too hard, the sound of the impact sharp against the table. "Listen to me, Jeremy. I need to fix this." Jeremy hesitated again, but then sighed in resignation. "I'll see what I can do." Henry ended the call and ran a hand down his face. His mind raced. How could he have been so blind? Henry had always prided himself on being a man of power, a man who could read people, understand them in an instant. It was how he built his real estate empire, by knowing exactly who had money and who was just pretending to. But today, he had played himself. His arrogance had cost him millions. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room, his expensive charcoal gray suit now wrinkled from how long he had been sitting in shock. He needed to think. There had to be a way to get back in contact with her, to salvage this mess. He pulled up his contacts again, scrolling down to a name he hadn't called in years. Marcus Delaney, the same man he had just seen on TV shaking Vanessa's hand. With a deep breath, he dialed. After 2 rings, a smooth, cocky voice answered. "Weston, I figured I'd be hearing from you." Henry gritted his teeth. Marcus had always been his biggest rival, and now the smugness in his tone made Henry want to throw his phone across the room. "You closed the deal with Carter," Henry stated bluntly. Marcus chuckled. "I sure did. You let a billionaire slip right through your fingers, Henry. You losing your edge?" Henry swallowed the sharp retort building in his throat. He couldn't afford to let his pride get in the way any longer. "What will it take for me to get back in?" Henry asked, his voice tight. "What do you want?" Marcus let out a low whistle. "Oh, this is rich. You think you can just jump back into this deal? Newsflash, Henry. Vanessa Carter doesn't need you." Henry clenched his jaw. "I know that." "Then what do you want?" Marcus asked, his tone growing serious. Henry hesitated. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure of the answer. His entire career had been built on control, on knowing the game and playing it better than anyone else. But today, he had been outplayed. Finally, after a long pause, Henry exhaled. "I want to fix this." Marcus chuckled again, but this time, it wasn't as condescending. "Then you better figure out how to do that on your own, pal." The line went dead. Henry Weston, once the most respected real estate mogul in the state, was now the fool who had underestimated Vanessa Carter. And the worst part? He wasn't sure if he could ever undo it. Henry sank back into his chair, rubbing his temple. For the first time, he truly understood the weight of his mistake. Vanessa Carter wasn't just another potential buyer. She wasn't someone he could ignore or dismiss. She was a force, a billionaire, and most importantly, she was out of his league. Henry Weston had spent his entire career believing that he controlled the game, that his word, his judgment, and his instincts were absolute. But now, sitting alone in his luxurious office the next morning, the silence around him felt heavier than it ever had before. He had lost. Not just a deal, not just a mansion sale. He had lost his reputation, his credibility, and the very foundation of his arrogance. The news of Vanessa Carter's real estate acquisition had gone viral overnight. Social media was flooded with clips of her speech at the gala, interviews with industry experts praising her business acumen, and even a few snide remarks from real estate professionals calling Henry out directly. One tweet, in particular, made his blood boil. Imagine rejecting a billionaire's cash offer because of demographics. Henry Weston just lost the biggest deal of his career. It had hundreds of thousands of likes. Henry clenched his jaw as he scrolled through the comments. Oh, this is poetic justice. A masterclass in self-sabotage. Bro fumbled a billionaire. I'd be sick. Vanessa Carter didn't even need to get revenge. She just let the world expose him. Henry exhaled sharply, tossing his phone onto his desk. His mistake was public now. A desperate attempt. He couldn't sit back and let this be the end. If there was one thing Henry Weston never did, it was accept defeat. He picked up the phone, dialing the one number he had spent all morning hunting down. Vanessa Carter's executive assistant. The line rang once, twice. Then, a calm but firm female voice answered. Vanessa Carter's office, this is Melissa speaking. Henry cleared his throat, trying to sound as professional as possible. Melissa, this is Henry Weston. I'd like to speak with Ms. Carter regarding the property on... The woman cut him off immediately. She's not interested, Mr. Weston. His stomach dropped. Wait. Melissa continued, unbothered. Miss Carter has already secured a better deal elsewhere. There is nothing further to discuss. Henry forced a chuckle, trying to salvage what was left. Melissa, I think there's been some miscommunication. I'd like to personally apologize to Miss Carter and... Melissa sighed. Mr. Weston, Miss Carter doesn't have time for this. Then, before he could even argue, the call ended. She had hung up on him. Henry Weston, the man who had built an empire on deals, was now officially irrelevant to Vanessa Carter. The humbling moment. For the first time in his life, Henry Weston was powerless. He sat back in his chair, staring blankly at the office ceiling. The truth was undeniable. Vanessa Carter had won, without even trying. She didn't need to argue with him. She didn't need revenge. She had simply let the world see what kind of man he was. And now, no high-profile buyer would ever take him seriously again. His phone buzzed. A new email. He clicked on it. Subject: Termination of Partnership, Westfield Estates. Henry's stomach twisted as he skimmed the email. One of his largest investors was pulling out. A second email came in, then a third. More investors, more deals crumbling. Vanessa Carter had single-handedly destroyed his credibility in less than 24 hours. Not because she had gone out of her way to ruin him, but because he had ruined himself. The reflection. By noon, Henry had poured himself another drink, staring out the massive window of his office. His mind replayed every mistake he had made, every red flag he had ignored. The way Vanessa had stayed calm, unshaken while he dismissed her. The way his own assistant had tried to warn him. The way he had assumed wealth only looked one way. For the first time, Henry Weston had to face a truth he had spent his life avoiding. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was. And Vanessa Carter? She had outplayed him without ever needing to lift a finger. A new reality. By the time evening rolled around, Henry was no longer the man he had been the day before. He had spent decades looking down on people, deciding who was worthy of wealth, of access, of success. And now he was the one people looked down on. Because his arrogance had cost him everything. As he shut off his office lights and stepped out of the building, Henry Weston understood something deeply for the first time in his life. Vanessa Carter had never needed his approval. She had already won before she even walked into his office. And that was a lesson he would never forget.